Here's a riddle for you. What happens when you become so spiritually evolved that you can no longer fall in love? Not because you've grown cold or cynical, mind you, but because you've become too awake to be fooled by love's most cherished illusion. It's the cruelest joke of consciousness, really. The very wisdom that was supposed to bring you closer to love actually makes it nearly impossible to tumble headfirst into romance the way you once did, with all that delicious blindness, that sweet, intoxicating madness. You see, most people imagine that spiritual awakening is like graduating to some celestial VIP lounge, where all your problems dissolve and you float around in perpetual bliss. What a beautiful misconception! The truth is far more paradoxical. Awakening doesn't eliminate your challenges, it actually multiplies them, because suddenly you're capable of handling complexities that would have crushed your sleeping self. And perhaps the strangest challenge of all? You discover that falling in love, that most celebrated of human experiences, has become as foreign to you as trying to believe in Santa Claus again. Let me paint you a picture. You're sitting across from someone attractive, charming, available. In the old days, your mind would have already begun its ancient dance, weaving fantasies, projecting futures, spinning that delicate web of romantic possibility that transforms an ordinary Tuesday evening into the opening scene of your personal love story. But now you sit there, perfectly present, seeing them clearly not as a character in your unfinished novel, but as they actually are, a human being, with their own wounds, their own journey, their own inner universe that has nothing whatsoever to do with completing yours. And something inside you just doesn't engage. Not because they're unworthy, but because you can no longer participate in the grand theater of projection that we've been taught to call falling in love. You've seen behind the curtain, and the machinery is impossible to ignore. What we romantically call falling in love is really a masterful form of self-hypnosis. Two people meet, and almost instantly, the mind begins its creative work like a spider spinning silk. It weaves threads of memory, desire, fantasy, and need until you're no longer relating to the person sitting before you at all. You're relating to a tapestry of your own imagination, and then, quite drunk on your own creation, you declare, "I am in love." But notice the beautiful absurdity. This so-called love often burns, brightest not in the beloved's presence, but in their absence. It feeds on uncertainty, thrives on longing, grows fat on the sweet agony of not knowing. It's a love that requires hunger to survive, the emotional equivalent of a flame that only burns when you keep feeding it, kindling made of your own insecurity. The ego is remarkably clever at disguising its loneliness. It calls it passion. It dresses it up in poetry and trembling glances and midnight confessions. But strip away the romantic vocabulary, and what you find is this simple plea: I am incomplete, and I need you to make me whole. That's not love, that's a business transaction. Now, awakening isn't some mystical lightning bolt that transforms you into an enlightened sage overnight. It's actually quite ordinary. It's simply the moment when the veil slips and you suddenly see the machinery of your own performance. You notice how what you called love was often entangled with fear of being alone, with projection, with the desperate hope that someone else could solve the puzzle of your existence. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The spell isn't broken because you've become cynical about love, quite the opposite. It's broken because you can finally distinguish between love's authentic face and its countless counterfeits. Where you once might have sworn you'd found your missing half, you now see more clearly a fellow human being with their own light and shadows, their own completeness and their own journey. The enchantment of imagining them as your savior simply dissolves. What once felt like fire now feels like smoke. Cravings that seemed irresistible reveal themselves as fragile as paper boats on an infinite ocean. The thrill of pursuit, the drama of uncertainty, the exquisite torture of waiting, all of it begins to look faintly absurd when measured against the stillness you've discovered within yourself. You don't despise these old patterns, you simply can't mistake them for love anymore. It's like watching a magic show after someone has explained how every trick works. You can still enjoy the performance, appreciate the artistry, even laugh and applaud, but you know it's theater, not ultimate reality. And here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because this clarity, this freedom from illusion, comes with its own form of exile. When the familiar intoxications no longer move you, you don't immediately step into some blissful alternative. Instead, you find yourself in a strange kind of liminal space, standing apart from the world you once navigated so easily. It's not loneliness in the ordinary sense. You may have friends, companions, even admirers, but there's a sharper kind of solitude that comes with recognizing how few people can meet you at the depth you now inhabit. When you try to step back into the old patterns, to pretend you can still play along, it rings hollow. You cannot unknow what you know. And there's fear, the fear that perhaps the world will never quite match this new appetite for truth, that the people capable of real meeting will remain impossibly rare, that you'll spend your life carrying this fullness into rooms where no one else has learned to hold such space. This is why it feels impossible, you see. Not because love has vanished from your life, but because your vision has become too clear. You can no longer fall in love the way you used to, and sometimes that clarity feels more like exile than enlightenment. But awakening doesn't just strip away illusions, it also raises the standard of your heart. Without effort, without conscious decision, you find yourself drawn towards something deeper than charm or beauty or clever compatibility. You're pulled toward a quality of presence, a depth of understanding that touches the very core of being, and suddenly the crowd thins out dramatically. Where once the world seemed full of romantic possibilities, now you find only a precious few who have walked through their own shadows and emerged awake on the other side. Most people are still playing the old game, still caught in the beautiful web of projection and need that you've learned to see through. This is the loneliness of the awakened, not the petty absence of company, but the profound solitude of being understood by very few. So what does love look like when it's stripped of its familiar costumes? It shifts its entire center of gravity. It moves from grasping to giving, from the melodrama of pursuit to the profound stillness of presence. When it comes, if it comes, it must arrive clean, unmasked, unforced, not as rescue, not as possession, but as the meeting of two already whole beings who choose to share their freedom. There's no clinging, only the joy of sharing, no bargaining or hidden contracts, but a delight that needs no justification. It's love stripped of theater, yet filled with a spaciousness the old stage could never contain. This is what the awakened wish for, though they seldom speak it aloud. Not a love that consumes, but one that expands. Not a love that binds, but one that frees. And they're willing to wait even if it means a lifetime rather than surrender to the old hypnosis. Because once your eyes have opened, peace itself becomes too precious to gamble away. Peace isn't some consolation prize for those who couldn't find love. Peace is the treasure itself. The stillness you've discovered is richer than any of the storms you once called passion. The old fire, all sparks and noise, now seems like a child's game beside the quiet flame that needs no fuel. When you live from this understanding, the company grows sparse. It may be a long while before you encounter another who has slipped out of the same trance. Such meetings are rare, but then, what is a diamond if not rare? Its scarcity is precisely its worth. So the awakened carry this unspoken vow: better to stand alone in clarity than to kneel again before shadows. To pretend otherwise would be to betray the gift that awakening has placed in their hands. And so they wait not in despair, but in patience. Not because they've given up on love, but because they understand that real meeting is rare and therefore infinitely precious. What a strange gift consciousness gives us, at once a freedom and a solitude. The awakened would rather face the long silence than the noise of counterfeit loves. They'll wait as long as it takes, because they know that when love finally does arrive, it won't be born from hunger but from fullness, not from fear but from freedom. And that kind of love, though impossibly rare, is the only love that can truly last. Here's the beautiful twist that completes our paradox. When you no longer need love to rescue you, you become completely free to give it. When you stop demanding that another complete you, you can finally meet them as they actually are, not as a fantasy or a savior, but as a fellow traveler in this mysterious experiment of existence. This is why the awakened don't fall in love, they rise in it. They are not dragged under by longing, but lifted into freedom. And when love is no longer a prison, it reveals what it always was beneath all the costumes and theater, the purest expression of life itself, celebrating its own infinite creativity. When you're no longer enslaved by the need to be loved, you discover something remarkable. You're freer to love than you ever imagined possible. And that freedom, my friends, is worth every moment of the wait.